eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.
Michael Phillip from the Third Eye Drops YouTube channel. Welcome, man. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it, dude. Excited to riff with you.
It's been a while. We've been talking about doing this for, it feels like 6 months now, since you invited me to be on your channel, which I was super grateful for. Like I said, when I was there, I've been a fan of your work long before this channel even existed. So it is a pleasure to have you here, man. And you still have a lot of like amazing conversations around UFOs, consciousness, the mind, psychedelics, reality, like all of it. Really interesting stuff. And you speak very deeply about it all. You're very well read, you're very articulate. Um, Sometimes it's even hard to keep up, which I like because you're pushing my mind to expand a little bit as well. And I want to get into as many of those things as we can. But one thing that I've noticed throughout your videos is you sort of always seem to come back to Carl Jung. So there's obviously like a big fascination there. So if you could tell us who Carl Jung is for anyone who may not know,
Yeah.
and why he's integral to your channel and what you do.
Yeah. I mean, for whatever reason, Jung is one of the first things that really resonated on my channel. And then you know how it is, man. Like, and first of all, congratulations to you too, because you're killing it on your channel and you've seen some really amazing growth in the last year. And I know that's hard to do and it takes dedication. And like sort of case in point, Jung was one of the first things that really connected with people on my channel. And I'm trying to remember which video it was. There was a video on the shadow, and then there was also a video on synchronicity, and both of those videos did well. And those are both like ideas that are core to the philosophy of Jung. And it's almost hard to summarize him in a nutshell, but you know, he's this Swiss German psychiatrist, early to mid 20th century, and he's coming off the heels essentially of being um the protege of Freud. You know, so he's like steeped in Freud's psychological method, um and he basically slowly realizes that he has major philosophical differences with Freud. And those philosophical differences kind of lead to this schism. And then to just skip to the juicy nuggets, um, in that period of time where he loses a really prestigious appointment at a university and you know loses his sort of career trajectory, he has essentially like a mystical experience and sort of like a psychical break. And that's the period of time that he writes the Red Book, which is this huge book you can sort of see behind me. And it's this insane visionary mystical book where he's speaking to these like archetypal figures. He has an encounter with this being that he calls Philemon, which is essentially like his wise old man archetype. Philemon gives this crazy speech about essentially this like Gnostic worldview where he talks about what individuation is, and he talks about you know, people who fail to individuate essentially just sink back into what he calls the pleroma, and the pleroma is essentially like you just get deleted, right? So there's so much to talk about when it comes to Jung, because the boilerplate is like he's a psychiatrist, right? But really he's this deep mystical mythopoetic alchemist who looked into everything from UFOs to alchemy, and just anything esoteric basically that he could get his hands on. And that led to this just incredibly unique mind and output that I think made him one of, if not the most consequential thinkers of the 20th century.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually touched on the idea of individuation there, because that's exactly where I wanted to go next, because you did a video on this specifically
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, which I remember watching and I really enjoyed it. So could you expand particularly on that? Because I think the idea of what he speaks about with individuation is pretty important, and something that could probably a lot of people would benefit from knowing about.
Yeah, yeah. And sort of like everything with Jung, there's sort of like the exoteric, palatable mainstream version of what it is. But
Mm,
behind what I'm about to say, there is like an esoteric deeper meaning. So the sort of surface level meaning is that every individual psyche is going through this process of maturation, right? I don't know how cleanly Jung breaks it down, but most analytical or depth psychologists today, I think they talk about it in like three phases. And they sort of map over major stages of life, right? So the first is your childhood. You're essentially like attached to your family structure, your mother. Your ego is kind of forming and congealing in this period of time. Then comes adulthood. This is like when your ego has solidified, and now you need to go like make your way in the world, right? Like make a career, have a relationship, have children, like whatever your idea of what you need to accomplish is on the you know individual level. And then a lot of people's maturation kind of stops there, and then they hit this midlife sort of range that now, in a cliche way, we talk about as the midlife crisis, where they just double down into the materialism, right? They try to keep themselves younger. They try to like flaunt their wealth. They try to hold on to everything. But Jung says this is completely wrong. Like you're essentially like remaining in this infantile stage, and what you really need to do is move on to the third stage, the individuation stage, where you do what he calls this inward turn, where basically you start asking these big questions about reality, these bigger questions about who you are behind the ego, spiritual questions, things of that nature. So, individuation is that whole process collectively, but it really culminates in that third individuation stage where the person becomes basically like this unique um, version of themselves. And the main stages of alchemy map over this as well. But the deeper esoteric meaning that I was alluding to, you and I kind of talked about this a little bit. Oddly, with some of the Michael Aquino stuff, he even get like dilly
Yeah.
dallies in the same area. And what it really comes down to is there's this trope in Western esotericism, like the Western um, mystical path, occult path, whatever you want to call it. And it's essentially this idea of self apotheosis. And there are like toxic versions of this, and I think beautiful versions of this. And Jung's individuation is really this. There, like in some of his more mystical writings, and some of his like his protege Mary Louise von Franz talks about this. She essentially says that individuation is nothing less than become like the psyche figuring out how to immortalize itself through individuating on Earth, and then there's some kind of like second birth that takes place, almost like I believe she said or alludes to like upon death. Um, and this idea goes back to the ancient world, man, to Hermeticism, to Platonism, to even before that. So that's one of the reasons Jung just really speaks to me, because he started from this scientific, reductionistic worldview and had the opportunity to just stay in that lane and be incredibly successful as the person who would essentially take Freud's mantle, right? Like the most famous um, like the person who invented therapy as we think of it today in a lot of ways, and he just couldn't do it because he knew like deep down in his soul that he was meant for something else and something more. And the idea is there comes a moment or certain moments in our own lives where we need to make those decisions for ourselves, and I'm sure you see that in your own life
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I wanna come back to that in a sec, but just before you mentioned that he sort of had these revelations after having, you said, like, a vision, and, like, the way you described it kinda sounded like almost like channeling or like a download, as we would
Yeah.
kinda call it today. Can you explain more on how that happened?
Yeah, so there's one famous case where, have you heard about the whole seven sermons to the dead thing?
No, I've heard of
Dude,
that,
it's
but I
crazy.
couldn't tell you about it.
So Jung didn't release this red book at all. Like, he knew that it would make him look crazy if people saw it, basically. And it's this
Mhm.
insane, beautiful work of like all this artwork that he did, and just poetic writing and insane calligraphy, and just like levels of genius, like multiple layers of genius that you're just like, holy shit. Um, but what he did do is, under a pseudonym of Basilides of Alexandria, who was a real life Gnostic sage, under a pseudonym, he released what he called Seven Sermons to the Dead. And this is actually part of the Red Book. And it's that whole part I was talking about before with this Philemon figure giving all this Gnostic wisdom. And the way that came about is he had this experience one night. I don't remember what year it was, but it was during this period where he felt like there's some quote where he says he felt like his home was filled with spirits or something. And he was sitting at his desk at night and he heard like a knock on the door. And I don't remember if he like answered the door and like felt like someone was physically there or not, but he heard this voice that basically said, we've come from it's either we've come from Jerusalem or we've come from Alexandria and we are not satisfied. So and then he just, like, goes into a fugue state and almost, like, like you're saying, like, channels all, like, the 7 sermons to the dead and just writes nonstop. It might be I don't remember if it was in one night over the course of, like, 2 or 3 really inspired nights, but he just writes all of this down. And I think if he were sitting here today, he would say that he felt like he was channeling something in that text. So
So,
so yeah,
so he
there
doesn't go
there
into
were
sort of
yeah.
detail. He doesn't really go into detail on how it kind of came about, other than it was this kind of like almost mystical experience where it was just kind of flowing through him when he was writing.
Yeah, and I think later in life, he did shine some light on this and share this story. I don't it could be in one of his later books or his, biography or something where he tells the story in full, but it's been a while since I've read it, so some of the more particular details escape me,
Hmm.
but that was the gist of it
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. What, like, roughly what year is this happening?
1920? I think early
Yeah.
1920s this was happening.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess like this is a similar sort of era to like Aleister Crowley as well. And
Mhm,
seems like back then, when, because I believe, going back to what you were saying before with the fact that we sort of generally turn and double down on this sort of like materialistic world, this path in life, generally probably due to the fact that that is just what is pumped into us, into our minds, everywhere we look, our phones. Like this is just sort of like what we are conditioned to grow up and believe is like not just the way, but like the only way. Like you're not even
right.
really told about like an alternative path. So I find it interesting that you see, back a century ago now, more, when a lot of these things weren't around, when we weren't having so much like programming put into our minds, that people were sort of either more susceptible or at least open to these ideas of like um alternative ways of thinking, an inward path as like a third stage of growth and development.
Mhm,
And it makes a lot of sense as well, man, because now in the modern age, when we do have all of these things that are distracting people, you have people coming out saying like, oh, I feel like I had like a spiritual awakening. Like I turned like 30, man, and I don't know what happened. Like suddenly I just sort of started caring
mhm,
about how I treat people more and all of these things. And it's almost like, no, dude, what you're actually experiencing is almost like like a psychological puberty in a way. Like
right,
it's a
yeah,
it's something natural that was always meant to happen. You were just never told about it. And some people handle it by almost like forcing the ship to continue turning down this like materialistic path and going through the midlife crisis, like you said. Or some people, I guess, just end up walking the path, but perhaps like without a guide because, yeah, it's just not really something that's spoken about much in the modern day, which, leads to the question of like, why is that? Especially when people back
yeah.
then seem to be aware of it in some way.
It's because it's so hard to talk about, right? Because there's that famous Jung quote that is cliche but so deeply true, which is if the path before you is clear, you're probably on somebody else's.
Mm,
So if with that being the case, it's hard to talk about individuation with a person who hasn't kinda already figured out what their path is, because
yeah.
you can't tell anybody how to do it. You can sorta give them, the Joseph Campbell, like, "Follow your bliss," and, you can ask people leading questions, but ultimately, they have to decide, and they have to make those decisions for themselves. And I mean, it's ongoing, man. Like, I'm not sitting here from some privileged hubristic position being like, I'm on YouTube and I figured out how to make it a living, so I individuate. No, no. I think that was probably part of my path, but I feel all the time like I'm failing, like I'm stumbling, like I'm taking the most fucking circuitous route down the path and like just doing pointless side quests. Um, so yeah, man, it's a
For
constant
sure.
negotiation.
Yeah, I think yeah, constant negotiation is a great way to put it. I think, and I think as well, it probably requires sacrifice or at least like a lot of detaching because at least in my own experience, I feel that, and again, like you, I don't think I've got it all figured out either. It's a constant sort of battle, right? But I think given that most of the people that we grow up around, like generally to generalize, and I guess it's kind of unfortunate, like most people are still stuck in that sort of searching for what it is that kind of really fulfills them, their own individuation, right? Have found that like you sometimes need to separate yourself from, could be people, could be a place. You got to separate
Yeah.
yourself from things to kind of like give yourself that clarity or even maybe the confidence to kind of take that first step into the unknown. And only I feel like once you take that step do you get a response on like this is the way or not.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the other ways that's tied into this that I recommend this book every chance I can get. There's a book called Soul's Code by James Hillman. And Hillman is another psychologist who comes out of a very similar sort of philosophical worldview to Jung. But I would say he's not afraid to push things even a little further where this is another idea that Jung talked about, the idea of the personal daimon or this like guiding spirit that everybody comes into the world with that we're like and by the way, like if you joined uh some esoteric occult traditions still take this extremely seriously and literally. So like if you joined like a Western or if you started practicing like Western esoteric lodge magic, one of the main goals is to come into contact with your personal daimon or your holy guardian angel. And some people debate if those are exactly the same thing, but I'll leave that aside. But the idea is that you have a sort of like attending spirit that you come into the world with, and that thing is sort of tied to your individual destiny. And this book, Soul's Code by Hillman, gets into this idea really deeply, and he talks about all of these famous people, some of whom are very tragic or died very tragically, um, that really struggled early on in life because they were just like basically he's arguing they were meant to do something. Like
Hmm.
this person came into the world with a mission to sing, and everything in her life was trying to prevent her from singing, and she suffered immensely until she like got in that stage for the this is an exact actual story, and I wish I could remember who it is, but um she wasn't even supposed to sing. She was on stage to do something else, and she just started spontaneously singing. Like she just decided, "Fuck it, I'm gonna sing instead." And then it just went amazingly well, and then from there, she was on that path. So this idea that you may even sincerely, literally, on a spiritual level, have something that you are either meant to do or at least a path or a type of way of expressing yourself that you should be doing. And I can't escape that, man. And even if it's not true, I think it's a good personal myth to follow because in my experience, like it's one of the most kind of important sense making, true north kinds of things I've come across in my life, and it really resonates with me.
Yeah, I think that's important as well. Like whatever path or sort of like ideology you choose to sort of place your belief in, you're probably never going to have like a concrete 100% like, yes, this is the correct way, right?
Right.
It's just whatever you choose to believe in. So, given that, it would make sense to kind of like choose something that is going to give you like, I guess, like a positive tone to whatever the direction is that you're choosing because at the end of the day, I think, yeah, where we place that belief kind of becomes the reality that we're participating in. And that's like on a individual subjective level. So it's a powerful choice that we all get to pick.
Yeah. Yeah. One before I leave that, I just want to offer this because this is one of the most simple, but I think beautiful sorts of metaphors that illustrates the point of both individuation and this idea of this personal daimon that leads you on the path of your destiny. Hillman would talk about it like the acorn becoming the oak tree, with this idea that the acorn within it, it has
Mm,
this ability, right? This like teleological path it could follow, and it could one day, if it like finds itself in the right conditions, blossom into this insane, beautiful oak tree, right? But most acorns are never going to do that, and I think that that idea with humans is it's just like a perfect analogy, right? Because I think we all sense that there is some kind of unique potential that we could reach, but all of the outside world and people and what's convenient and unfortunate twists of circumstance are all conspiring to prevent us from from ever reaching that point. And I just think
yeah.
it's so true.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it's a fantastic analogy. And like I wonder though as well, like, does everyone have a grand plan? Like this kind of sounds like a bit pessimistic, but like what would the world be like if every single acorn became an oak tree? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like would it just be this like chaotic bath of like superpowers and people pull like, going crazy in all kinds of different directions? Like I do wonder if, some people's role isn't anything kind of like grand or magnificent. I don't know, but I think like whenever I sort of hear these ideas or like these worldviews, I can't help but think about like the opposite or like seven different versions of it at the same time. I don't know, man.
Mhm.
It's just kind of how my mind
Yeah.
goes, but it is a fantastic analogy that definitely resonates with me as well.
Yeah.
Let's go to a little bit more recently. We sort of started with Jung, but lately you've been doing some really cool interviews. I was in your live chat just the other day
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
when you were talking to James Fox, which was
Yeah.
fantastic. Nice work with that one, man. Um, I guess given because you do a lot of UFO stuff as well, which I think we both agree is just one facet of like this crazy,
Yeah.
theory around consciousness and reality. Given all this people that you have spoken to, is there any kind of common thread that you've noticed around what the UFO phenomenon like might be or how it does link in to consciousness and reality?
Yeah. I think the easiest way to tie it into something is to kind of point to thinkers that I personally think are on the right track. I mean, I don't know. At the end of the day, like, I've never had a personal UFO experience. I'm only going with what makes sense to me and what I find to be the most empowering sort of POV to have when you're interfacing with this, because and I'll preempt this by saying I like the nuts and bolts stuff. I follow the mainstream disclosure. I think it's fun. I talk about it. I talk to some of those people, but you basically have no agency whatsoever around whatever whistleblower decides to say or not say. And as anybody who's been looking into this for a while knows, it's, you know, promise after promise after promise with exceptionally rare um instances of them actually revealing something. And even when they do reveal something, there's all this debate about if it's disinfo, if it's, counterintelligence, whatever. So you're left in this just absolute, sense making mess constantly when you're following it. But I do follow it and I do enjoy it. Um so that's one of the reasons I'm interested in the consciousness angle, because if the phenomena has something to do with consciousness, we all have consciousness. We're all tapped into consciousness. And that means we all have an ability to have experiences for ourselves. And though I just said I've never had a UFO experience, I have had anomalous consciousness experiences, and I've altered my consciousness enough various times to have very spiritually and ontologically impactful things happen. So that's why I'm more interested in that angle. So people like Jacques Vallée, people like John Keel, um, people like Lavenda. Like Lavenda's crazy, man. Like I've just been diving into secret machines in the last couple of weeks, and it's an insanely well researched book. But I don't know fully what his view is yet, but he's also tying together esotericism and UFO
Yeah.
stuff and ancient religion um so yeah, there's a lot there, man. Like this is a huge topic in and of itself. There's
Mm,
also a great book called uh why am I'm drawing a blank. Patrick Harper, who I had on recently too, Daimonic Reality, that gets into this whole idea that essentially ancient worldviews, like the ancient Greek worldview, for instance, where this notion that we lived in this ecology of non-physical intelligences, right? And sometimes these what we would call, in the UFO sphere, non-human intelligences will take a form. And they would have just called that fairy phenomena a couple or a few hundred years ago. They would have called it X, Y, or Z, depending on the culture. And
mm.
those kinds of arguments make a lot of sense to me, for sure.
Yeah, I spoke to Nathaniel Gillis. You know Nathaniel Gillis?
I don't.
He he's essentially, I guess he goes by like as a demonologist, and his
Mhm.
idea is that basically, like, whatever this intelligence is, it is a singular intelligence, and that when it is presenting itself to us, it's just kind of taking it has the ability to just kind of take the form of like whatever predisposed like idea we already have of what it might be. So like
Mhm.
if you think it's a fairy, if you think they're little trolls, if you think they're greys or reptiles, like that is like it's you that's kind of like coloring it in rather than the intelligence itself. Like whatever the intelligence is sort of like beyond just like
Mhm.
a singular 3D apparition, which is interesting. He's got some crazy theories that definitely, like you say, tie into this sort of like occult, maybe even like ritualistic side of things, which I do
Mhm.
want to go there, but we'll hold on that. And
Okay.
I think we should just say at this point as well, given the topics that we're going to get into, I feel like we can both say that neither of us actually know. Like we're just spitballing, we're just brainstorming. So like rather than having to say like I don't actually know before we go into any sort of thing that we have to say, I think we can just kind of put that there
Yeah.
before we move forward.
Well, maybe
Is
I'll
there
know.
anyone?
Maybe I will know. Maybe I
Well,
will know, Josh.
if you
Just
if you
I
do
probably won't.
if you do lay it down for me, lay it down for me.
I'll
We'll
give
get
you
the
my
exclusive.
there's a great Robert Anton Wilson quote who, if you've never read or listened to any of his books, I highly recommend. But I'm gonna go with um I have no beliefs but many suspicions on this
Yeah.
topic. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the safest way to go about it, right? I think when you get 2 feet into anything, it can get a little, not only a little bit murky, but I think then you're sort of like, by design, you're now automatically kind of shut off to other things because you've already put 2 feet into this particular
Yeah.
area, which now, kind of shuts you off to the rest of it. Have you ever spoke to anyone who, or have you ever had anyone on your show or off the show, I guess, that you feel like was spinning you a little bit of bullshit? You don't have to name names, but you can if you
No,
want
no,
to.
I'm trying to think truly. And it's just and this is another aspect of this that's so hard because and why again I gravitate toward the consciousness side of things because if you're not going to believe whistleblowers, you're not going to believe government people, then you have to believe experiencers, right? And while I would never to publicly at least say that I think someone is full of shit directly, I just don't know. Like I just don't know. Even if they're the most believable, incredible storyteller and they seem completely genuine, I don't know. I don't know what I would have saw if I was wherever they were, had whatever experience they had. So that's the other problem, right? Is like who do you believe and what level of conviction do you put into other people's stories? And I'm not shut down to talking to experiencers on the channel, but I feel like we need to have more to talk about than just that because at the end of the day, you have to put you're giving so like if you're going to have a 2-hour conversation with somebody, right? You're essentially having a 2-hour conversation that you have no POV into. You just have to allow them to tell the story, which is
Mm,
fine, which is totally fine. But that's kind of hard for me. It's kind of hard for me to just sit there and go, "Yeah, uh-huh.
mhm.
Wow, that's crazy. Really? Wow, that's nuts, man." Like, like for 2
Yeah.
hours. Like it can be great, but it can also be frustrating. So, I don't know if I can think of someone. I mean, I've definitely met people at like conventions and stuff who come up to me and like want to tell me crazy stories that I'm just like, "Okay,
Yeah.
okay, crazy man. Wow."
Yeah.
You know? So there's that. But yeah, and again, I don't wanna sound like I know, I really don't know. Maybe those people were being truthful, but you get a vibe. You get a certain vibe.
For sure. Yeah, I think vibes are completely understated. I'm a very vibe led guy openly, which I think a lot of people will like criticize or use that as a reason to like maybe not want to listen to me, which is like completely fine. Um, Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I do think like intuition is a big thing. I think it's probably got a lot to do with like some kind of ability that we've like lost or forgotten, and it's not that I think like I've perfected it by any means,
Yeah,
but I've found that by leaning into it and like listening to those feelings, listening to that kind of little voice almost every single time, it's generally led to like a positive result. Even at times when I've been like ignoring it and then it won't go away, it almost seems to like become like more louder, like there's just like it almost creates like an anxiety that I'm not doing what I really feel
right.
deeply that I'm meant to, even though it feels totally counterproductive to like what I'm actually doing. You know what I mean? And then when you actually do it, it's like, oh, it all kind of works out. Just going back to what you were saying though, with the whole belief thing and is so and so bullshitting. One, I guess, sort of like metaphor that I always sort of come back to, and I think it could be applied to almost every situation is I think it's called like the 10 blind men and the elephant. Have
Oh,
you
yeah, yeah.
seen like
Uh-huh.
yeah. So basically for anyone who doesn't know, you've got an elephant, you've got 10 blind men around it, all touching a different part of the elephant, trying to explain what it is. They're basically both having a completely different experience to all the other people around them. So they all think that each other are either lying or wrong or whatever. But in reality, what they're experiencing is just much larger than a single
Yeah.
perspective. And they're just really experiencing one facet of it. So when you've got like the Bledsoes coming out saying that they can summon these orbs, and then you've got very nuts and bolts people saying, no, that's all bullshit. It's craft. They're from Zeta Reticuli, whatever. That's what I think the problem is because, like you said, we don't actually know. And the truth is, both could be true. In fact, I do often think that the phenomenon is a bit of the fact that we just kind of lump everything into this phenomenon basket.
Mhm,
The
mhm.
truth is, we could be lumping in five or six different
Totally.
things that are maybe share similar, like visual like visually they might look the same to us, so we just all lump it into this like UFO phenomenon basket, but in reality is they could be very different things. Could be a multitude
Right.
of things that we don't understand.
Yeah, and I suspect that's what's going on. Like, I was gonna ask you before why this I think you said his name was Nathaniel Gillis. Like, what is his rationale for thinking that it's all one intelligence?
It's been a while since I've spoken to him, but he connects it a lot to sigils. I believe the idea that like experiences and people who have had like encounters with the phenomenon
Mhm.
seem to get these like subdermal sigils, and
Mm.
he relates these sigils to actual like occult I guess like artifacts and sigils, and he believes that there is like a link, and that whatever is behind the phenomenon is, or whatever is behind this sort of intelligence, he
Yeah.
termed it as like an occult practitioner. So I
Mm.
guess that is his, obviously that is his sort of worldview, and he's coming at it from like a very like a demonologist would.
Yeah.
But I think it's the sigils and like subdermal scarification that is like his link between the two.
Mm. Okay. I've never even heard of that. So, I mean,
I had
I'm
neither.
sure. Yeah,
It was
yeah.
super interesting to have a conversation with him. And again, it's a great theory. There are definitely elements to it that are compelling.
Is he coming at it from a religious POV?
Not in a traditional sense. I mean,
Okay.
I think like when you're talking demons, I
Yeah,
think you kind of automatically are now in the
yeah.
religious area. But he's not like, he's not like some devout, Christian or Catholic or anything like that. I think that's just his perspective on it.
Yeah, that's one of the things, like, when I, hear the sort of, like, Collins elite sort of take, or the "it's all demons that are here to do some nefarious thing." I kinda like, I shrink back from that, because I think it's just such a product of our own current psychotechnologies. It's our own current lenses that we're using to see the world, where you have to wonder if the same, like, let's say it is a spiritual phenomenon. How would people in a tribal, shamanistic culture have seen that? How would people in ancient Greece have seen it? How would people in ancient India have seen it? They didn't, like, yes, they had words for, malevolent spiritual entities, but there were also, like, they all understood that there was this whole ecosystem of disincarnate beings, like, from gods to nature spirits to malevolent spirits to angelic things, depending on the time and the culture. And the more I read into that, like, because that's kind of another hobby of mine, is reading, various esoteric things. And it seems like up to some point in history, and it was really probably has to do with, like, the Judeo-Christian worldview becoming this, like, all-encompassing hegemonic force in the West in terms of, like, how people think about spirituality, or at least most people do. I feel like that's a fairly recent way to look at, um, non-physical encounters, like, all through this lens of it's all demons. Like, I think that's a fairly modern way of thinking. So I'm always a
Mm.
little, that's one that always pushes me away a little, or a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I know. Or a lot. No, I would agree with you in a way, in that, like, again, I do think there are elements to it that I find interesting, but I also can't get away from the fact that, like, something can't all be one thing,
Right.
in a sense of, like, it can't all be evil. Or if it is, there must be some kind of, like, counter to that, where there is a good part of it. Like, there must be an equally good part, or something like that. So yeah, when a theory seems very, like, one-sided, whatever it might be, I do sort of I have a lot of questions, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there any cases or encounters that like, not even that you've spoken to, maybe just things that you've read about, but things that you are super high conviction of, or that's like your one case where you're really, like, selling people on it?
Well, I know one we've talked about recently that really intrigued me a lot was, like, particularly early on in the Skywatcher stuff, is something that really kind of brought all of this together for me in a way where I was like, "Oh my god, this is what I've been waiting for." A very articulate, personable, believable whistleblower who is actually involved in these programs coming forward and saying there are these psionic assets that have been involved in, the legacy program for a long time. We've known about it. These programs exist, and I also have a deep interest in psi. So, like, I've done kind of a lot of research on Project Stargate, classified program, that mostly revolved around remote viewing. Um, so, off of that, there's always the question, what did that turn into? And the idea that something like that could have evolved into something like these psionic assets, quote unquote. That was something that I don't know, it's always hard to say, again, that I'm really high conviction on anything, because you're not there. You don't know what's going on. You don't know the provenance of these stories. But now I have talked to a number of these people, even people who were involved in Skywatcher, and people who were intimately involved behind the scenes. And it's interesting because I sort of, like, they themselves even kind of downplay outcomes a little bit. Like, I think, because I had James, well, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on his last name right now, but he's one of the Skywatcher guys. He's one of the guys who put together the psionic team, and he's a guy who's essentially been having psychic stuff happen to him his whole life. And he kind of, I think on the air he said to me something like there were some pretty crazy expectations set early on. Even as somebody who was involved in it. So I think there's a lot of it's really easy to get carried away and think that one thing is going to be the ticket to finding out what the truth is finally. Um,
Yeah.
but
Didn't
I
they
do, s-
say
yeah,
didn't they say they were gonna land a craft by the end of the year?
I'm sure that was a goal. I'm sure that was a goal. And, I
Yeah.
point blank asked him too when I was talking to him, like, because there's that story that's going around that a craft did land. And
I haven't heard that. Tell us about that.
I think Patrick from Vetted um, was talking to, because he was working on that psionic documentary, and he was talking to a guy, um, his name escapes me, and that guy told him, "Hey, like, hush hush story. I heard someone from NASA was in the field with Skywatcher, and they got something to land." And it was just kind of said just like that. But when I talked to some of the other people who were like directly involved in that, they were like, I don't know, man. Like it's hard to say. Sensors weren't out, cameras weren't rolling, only, a very small number of people were there. They kind of have different versions of the story. So yeah, it's always stuff like that, right? Where even the people,
Typical
yeah,
NASA spookiness
yeah, and I heard even the NASA thing was a little bit of a not
and
quite
embellishment.
true. An embellishment, yes. And
Yeah.
I don't and I'm not holding back. I don't even know the details. Basically,
Yeah.
I'm telling you what was sort of softly
Put
generally
out.
given to me, like
Yeah.
without like I got the gestalt of what
Yeah.
happened without a lot of the details. Um and that's generally it. It is
Yeah.
and that's another just interesting microcosm of how a lot of the stuff goes.
Yeah. Do you feel like whether it's, psionically or, like muses acting through us, like do you think that there is, again, this is just, theories. Do you think there is an intelligence that is interacting with humanity in some way?
I think there has been for a long time. And I think that, when our spiritual traditions were more mature than they are now. I think, I mean, man, the ancient Greeks had oracles. They had mystery cults, mystery initiation cults. The idea of being in touch with non-human intelligences was absolute across the board. A felt part of reality for thousands and thousands of years. And I think we probably, my view on this changed because one of the things you said you want to riff on at some point is psychedelic experiences. And my view kind of changed on this because, there's one hypothesis that at like the Temple of Eleusis, for instance, which is the most well-known mystery cult in the ancient Greek Hellenic world, where you would essentially, if you got to do the inner mystery, the greater mystery, you would have a direct experience of the goddess, is what they would say. And I was certain 100% it's got to be psychedelic. It's got to be, they were in there having an experience. But the more I started to get into like Hermeticism and Platonism and just, reading stuff and like listening to classicists and, really, really deeply studied people talk about these things, I'm totally also open to the idea that there may be some lost technologies, like ancient sacred sciences that really did somehow get spiritual entities tied to certain temples, certain statues, certain pyramids, certain whatever. Like I've gone from thinking that that was like crazy fairy tale shit to totally possible, to be honest with you. So I think there was a point where we understood this much, much better now. And I think there was a point where we were in contact with things that maybe we would think of as we would call colloquially alien now, that they would have used a whole panoply, a whole smorgasbord of spiritual language and names and distinctions to talk about entities in millennia past.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree with you. And but do you think certain rings of society do still have this knowledge and potentially are like still doing these kind of things?
I think it's totally possible, man. I think it's totally possible. Like when you hear, people like Pasolka or people like Lavenda, these people who have done just immense, immense, immense amounts of research and talk to a lot of people who are deeply embedded into these programs and stuff. It seems like there's at least an awareness and a deference being paid where it's kind of like these people, they may not really be doing rituals. Maybe they are, but like maybe they just have this sense that this might be more real than we think it is. And we better show respect when we're playing in the realm of the gods with like things like the space program and things like I don't know, like quantum physics or like whatever. I think there's a sense of knowing when you're starting to tread on territory that feels sacred and a lot of respect is due, like
Mm.
I mean, think about the early days of going into space, man, assuming we really have gone into space. Like, it's crazy, dude. Like, the the balls to just believe, like, we could do this. We could actually send something into space. What an insane idea. Or even, like, we can fly, we can make an airplane. What an insane idea. Um, and I think that there are these moments in human history where we start to truly metamorphosize into something that we weren't before. And sometimes part of what that is some kind of technological breakthrough or innovation or some symbolic thing like suddenly being able to traverse the sky or go into outer space. I think all of those types of things also have allegories in the realm of consciousness. Like I don't think these things are just like distinct singular moments. I think it's all. I think there's things happening on so many unseen levels, man. And I'm just kind of blabbering, and I don't know if what I'm saying even makes sense to you right now, but it's making
Yeah,
sense in my head.
yeah, no, dude, I'm agreeing with pretty much everything that you're saying. And it's funny because just recently, only a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Armin Hillman. You might
Yeah,
have seen him, like he's been on Danny Jones, and that'll be out on the channel before this comes out. But dude, he he basically translates ancient Greek. That's what he
hmm,
does. And he was basically just going on about how like everything you're saying like in the ancient Greek world, like these people were deeply embedded in cults, probably like you said, not sure about drug taking. He would say absolutely.
right,
Using like the venoms from snakes, like snakes was super important, um and to these groups of people, but also sex as well. Like the ancient world seem to have like a far different kind of understanding, I guess, of like reality, or at least our place in it, or how we
totally.
connect to things that are non-physical. And it makes me wonder, like, did we really just like suddenly lose knowledge that seemingly could be like some of the most important knowledge to us, if all of that is really true and
Hmm,
real? Or has it been sort of like, compartmentalized to preserve like a power structure in society?
right.
And I was trying to impose my own little conspiracy theories there on Armin during the interview, but he just wants to stick to the text, which is probably a good thing, to be honest, rather than proliferate my own conspiracies. But when you've got people like David Icke, who I cover a lot on my own
Hmm,
channel, he's basically saying that there are like elite rings of society that are still very much embedded with like these weird occult rituals and things like that. And again, it just makes me think that like none of this has really changed. It's just been compartmentalized.
yeah,
And that is sort of the structure of society that we have today.
yeah. And just to be clear, I totally do think that they had very advanced pharmacological knowledge in the ancient world, in the Greco-Roman world, probably Egypt, probably all over the Near East and other parts of the world. My only point was I think it still may be possible that in certain, you know, mystery cults, for instance, I don't think they were only using drugs. I think there was other um like there's this whole I don't know if I want to get too deep down this rabbit hole because it starts to get kind of nerdy, but there's a whole like if you start looking into Western esotericism, there's this whole discipline called the telestic arts, basically, or I think that's the right word, where essentially it's like sacred, what we today would call alchemical technologies, where you're like turning things sacred through almost like a mixture of technology and magic. So, like this was huge in Egypt, right? Like building temples, building statues, building things that still perplex people today. Like we don't know how they were making these paints. We don't know how they were cutting these hard stones. We don't know how they were, making these sacred megalithic sites. And there was this whole like art form dedicated to that across many different disciplines, like expert metallurgists, expert sculptors, expert people who were making different paints and dyes. And the idea is that it would culminate in a statue that would not metaphorically host a god, but literally. Like they would do some special ritual called the opening of the mouth ritual inside like the holy of holies in one of these temples where only like the high priest and a couple other people who know how to do this ritual would go. And then it would literally be like the soul of Horus or whatever would be channeled into this thing. Like it might sound crazy to people listening to
No,
this, but
no,
but
dude,
I've
that's
yeah,
wild.
I've yeah, right,
That's
right.
because someone fairly close to me who's not like, into these weird rabbit holes at all, um, was telling me about a trip they took to Egypt, maybe like a couple of decades ago, a while ago. And
Mhm,
like I said, not into any of this stuff at all. Doesn't know anything about UFOs, consciousness, literally just going to see the pyramids as a tourist. And like trying to recall the story as best as I can because it was a while ago. Basically, they were staying at a hotel and it was there was a statue there, and I can't remember like what god it was meant to represent or who it was, but it was some kind of like Egyptian figure.
mhm.
And I just remember them saying that this statue caused them to just feel like an immense feeling of like, I guess, like anxiety or fear. And
Wow.
when they were like alone with it, they felt super uncomfortable. And then it was something like, 6 months later, they bumped into a friend who'd also stayed in Egypt at the same hotel. And she told them this story. And this person was like, I stayed in, I like, what room did you stay in? On the corner where you could see this? Yes, yes, yes. And they were
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I stayed in that room and I had the exact same like visceral reaction with this statue. And interestingly, I think, I could be wrong here, but Jay Anderson from Project Unity does a lot of
Uh-huh.
the megalithic stuff as well. I'm fairly certain it was him. I remember him speaking about having a similar reaction to a statue where he was kind of saying, I normally don't, um, you know, buy into these ideas that statues can have a presence or whatever. But I walked into this room where I was told that would be the case. And he's like, I don't know if it was placebo, but like I immediately felt
Mhm.
something. So
Yeah.
it's wild to hear what you're talking about, man, because yeah, I've heard from people firsthand who I definitely trust that could be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, if there is this big meta conspiracy to compartmentalize this information, which, you know, part of me suspects it could be true, man. Like what if exoteric mainstream religion is sort of like meant to be this opium of the masses, and then what really works is saved for like if not the truly cultural elite royal bloodlines, David Icke stuff, at least people who are willing to do the deep work to like live the philosophic, like, and when I say philosophic, I don't mean like, well, maybe you could go get a PhD and do this, but I mean like the philosophic lifestyle in the way that it used to be understood, like traveling the platonic hermetic path where you're living in like near ritual purity, and you're sort of like a cross between like a yogi and a philosopher and a magician, and like that's how you actually get access to this stuff, because I suspect that that's real too. And I, I think there's a tendency to think that if it's esoteric and it's a cult, it has to be nefarious and demonic and evil. I don't think so at all. Like I think some things can look like that from the outside looking in when you don't know what they're doing and what the goals are. Um, and that said, I think it's totally possible that there could be like full blown satanic blood sacrifice stuff going on too. But I think it's like it's a mistake to lump all of it into that category, because there's definitely like I just last night did a pod with this guy who I really like, named Ike Baker, who's like a practicing esotericist. He's a member of the Inner Order of the Golden Dawn. So, and he is like super deeply read. Um, I think he's a good dude. Like I don't think he's secretly doing blood sacrifices. And if he is, he's probably got a good reason for doing it. But um, yeah,
That does make sense. And I actually think that the preservation of that knowledge, it would be the only way, right? Because like if we're to believe the extremes, like let's say we're going to go down the road of what Armin Hillman is talking about, and this is just like a cult, like Western culture is kind of born out of this like rampant drug fueled sex divine connection society, right? If we are to now be at the level we're at today, nearly 8 billion people in the world, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier on about the acorn, right? If everyone of if the 8
yeah,
billion acorns in the world all had this knowledge to do these wild things, like what kind of world would it become? Like I don't know, maybe it would be a good thing, I don't know, but in a way, to like play devil's advocate, given the level of like power it sounds like this sort of knowledge and these practices and rituals may give someone, for good or for bad, it almost seems like the responsible decision to like be like, okay, not everyone can know about this. And like you said,
yeah,
maybe you can walk the path and the initiates and do the work and discover it for yourself. But just as like a base rule, like we're gonna
yeah.
have the restricted section. You know what I mean? It kind of
Right.
makes sense.
And you're getting into one of the reasons why things in esoteric lineages are secret to begin with. There's a couple good reasons for things to be secret. One is that you may actually be persecuted for doing something, right? Like if you're living in a time where there's like, you know, Catholic Inquisition type stuff. Like there were periods of time where like if you were part of if you were like a hermeticist or a platonist or something, you literally at a certain point within the Roman Empire had to go underground with your practices. Like your practices and your wanting to worship other gods, that became like expressly illegal, and you had to do that stuff like underground. So that's one good reason, and people were killed. Like one of the craziest stories is like there's this amazing brilliant philosopher named Hypatia, who was a teacher in Alexandria, and her father was this Platonic teacher, and she taught at the academy in Alexandria, and she taught everyone, like Christians, polytheists, everybody who was there. And she was kind of protected for a while because she taught everyone. But then, basically, to finish the story in a nutshell, she was eventually like lynched and murdered in the streets, like for personally doing nothing wrong, but because she was a symbol of this old way of like, you know, practicing spirituality in this old worldview. That was considered to be against this rising, Christian authority. So there were times where that's why you need to keep things
Yeah.
secret. So that's one reason. And the other reason is exactly what you're saying, is like if you tell like your deepest held spiritual revelation to someone who is like not equipped to understand it, they're like it's like a game of telephone with an idiot, right? It's like, this is the most important thing I have to say, and then you give that person that information and they start spreading like some retarded version of of like what's the most profound important thing to you. So
Yeah.
I think there are legitimately important reasons to keep things secret, And there are also nefarious reasons too. I'll totally admit
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, speaking of nefarious, that kind of segues us nicely because I know you've been to the Monroe Institute, yes?
Yes, yeah.
Cool. All right. I want to talk a little bit about that. And the reason why I say nefarious is because I interviewed someone recently who was basically saying how the Monroe Institute has the potential. It's almost like a mechanism for like brainwashing, right?
Mhm.
Or at least it has the potential to kind of like open up this part of your mind that enables your consciousness to be more susceptible to like some form of manipulation, right? Which again, I don't know if it's right or wrong. I've never been to the Monroe Institute. But also going to back to David Icke again quickly, he speaks about how Robert Monroe wrote about encountering these sort of interdimensional entities that they termed the alligators. So I wanted to know, like, do you know about that side of it? And do you
I
have an opinion on it? And I guess let's hear about your experience there as
I
well.
actually I don't know the alligators thing. Do you know any other details on that?
No, he really just, I haven't, apparently it's in his book. I haven't read the book, but David Icke speaks about how when the CIA was sort of studying Robert Monroe's ability to project his consciousness, one thing that they would frequently be documenting were these entities that he would encounter like in the astral plane, and that they ended up dubbing them or nicknaming them the alligators because that was kind of like the closest physical resemblance they
Mhm.
held to something that they knew, which, being David Icke and whatever, I immediately am like, okay, is this like where the reptilian conspiracy is
Right.
born from or is connected to? He doesn't specific. I mean, he kind of implies that, but I was curious if you knew about that at all, but also just like what your thoughts were and your experience was like at the Monroe Institute.
Yeah. No, my experience was honestly really beautiful there. And I'm not somebody who's like holding the line of whatever Monroe Institute's like. I'm not just gonna like parrot and repeat everything they say as if it's gospel. And to that point, they don't really have a dogma. Like if you go there and you do a gateway retreat, yes, there's like curriculum and there's orientation before every meditation, but you don't have to believe anything. Like they're not telling you, okay, this is this and that's that and this is like the metaphysical picture you have to believe in. It's not like that at all. It's very much everybody's having their own experience. Everybody's having their own insights. So basically so here's what it's like when you go there. I'll just tell you what it's like. You fly into the Charlottesville, Virginia airport. You drive about an hour out into the Blue Ridge Mountains. You get to this, beautiful hilly area, um, and there's like a main house, and there's like a secondary house too, and they have some retreats there, some retreats in the main house. My retreat was in the main house. Um, it was with like a normal group of people taking Gateway. It wasn't like a curated creator group or anything. That was when I got invited to, so that's the one I went. And people from all walks of life. I would say people generally skewed a bit older. There were a lot of kind of like retired-ish age people, middle-aged people, um, 1 or 2 people younger than me, a few people around my age. Um, but yeah, you get there, it's beautiful, it's pretty like chill environment. Um, and then the first day you just kind of hang out. You get to know people, you don't do any of the meditations. Day 2, you start working through what they call the focus levels. So they base their method around what they call focus levels. So there's like in Gateway specifically, you do focus 10, focus 12, focus 15, focus 21. So for the first couple of days, you're focusing on a single focus level. So focus 10 is what they call mind awake, body asleep. You're doing the meditations in a bed. You're just like laying down with headphones on. And there's like a method, I could walk you through the method if you want. But so there's sort of like a grammar of things that you do for every meditation. But ultimately, you just get to this point where you're just like essentially listening to these binaural beat tones and you're in a blacked out bed and you're just like laying down and you're just meditating. and then Bob's voice does come in. Like they use the old school version where it's Bob Monroe talking to you, and he'll come in and he'll give like little directions. Um, but yeah, man, like you're pretty much doing your own work. You're free to like go to sleep. You're free to take the headphones off. You're free to like just be like, I don't want to do this today, and like leave. Um, so it's by no means like a
It's not culty.
I mean, everybody's gonna have their own definition of culty, right?
Yeah.
Like anybody who is going to a retreat where it's like around something that's remotely spiritual. Some people would call it culty. I don't think so. I mean, I
Yeah.
got I
Okay.
got no bad vibes. Everybody was super sweet. I've gotten to know a lot of the people who are sort of like on the executive level, and all of them are like really cool. Like Hakeem Isler is one of the dudes. He's one of the guys behind Psy Games. Um, uh, Alan, who's the CEO, she's like one of the nicest women you'll ever meet. Just like smiley, um, gives tons of hugs. Dude, weirdly, Paul Hynek, so the son of J. Allen Hynek, is their CFO. Like he does the financials, and he's super cool, man. Like he's you'll if you go to Contact this year, you'll definitely meet him. Um,
Yeah, I'll be
and
there.
yeah, and I think I don't think he'd care if I say this because he just does it publicly. But bro, he will just publicly whip a DMT pen out like in the middle of in the middle of Contact in the desert and just be like and just yeah, he doesn't care. He's
Really?
cool. Yeah, yeah,
Does
yeah,
I mean, okay, well, I guess look, this takes us to the psychedelics part, I guess.
yeah.
I've never done
Well,
DMT. So just
should
on
I
that.
but before we go there, should I tell though the culmination of the Monroe story?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Let's finish that off. You got me a little excited when you said that
No,
whipped out
no,
the
no, no.
DMT pen.
Yeah, 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 yeah. We got time. We got time.
Yeah,
Um, so so the way that I wound up at Monroe is I did a pod with Chris Ramsey. Chris Ramsey, early on in Area 52, he did that series where he tried to learn remote viewing, had some really interesting success with remote viewing. Also went to Monroe Institute, um, tried to have an OBE during his gateway process retreat, felt like he was getting close but didn't succeed, but had a really good experience. Then when he got home, he kept doing the meditations and did have an OBE when he got home. I think he might have had two OBs. It's an amazing series. So if anybody's like interested in this topic, definitely go back to the early videos in Area 52 and check that out. Um, After doing that pod with Chris, I was like, man, like I've always been open to the idea that this is possible, like astral projection, OBE stuff, but it's always been like a little spooky to me. And the associations between Monroe and the intelligence agencies always weirded me out, of course, too.
yeah,
But then getting to know Chris and being like, okay, I'm getting no spooky weird vibes here whatsoever. And then getting in touch with people at Monroe, and again being, if anything, they kind of want to distance themselves from that era. It's pretty clear um, when you're there at this point. So after talking to him, after talking to people at Monroe, I'm like, okay, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to see what this experience is like. Generally, it was just a really beautiful experience. I mean, like, you're there all as strangers by like midway through, everybody's like crying together, laughing together. It's a pretty beautiful experience. I did not think I was going to have an OBE. I did not think I didn't feel like I did feel, they train you to feel these sensations and like these pulsations going through your body that they tell you like, okay, this is the non-physical energy body, whatever you want to call it. They actually don't like to use the word astral because they don't want to bring in any, funny enough, any overtly spiritual connotations, even though to me it is spiritual and I have no problem with that. Um, but yeah, whatever you want to call it, I would say everybody felt those sensations pretty early on. On the last full day of the retreat, we're doing one of the longest meditations. So like this over an hour where you're going through all of these different focus levels that we've learned. So you're doing 10 through 21. And then for the first time, they start doing this thing where they just drop it into silence. So it's like the tones are playing and then it will just go like completely silent. And Anybody who does gateway, whether it's at home or it's like at the retreat, you will fall asleep. You will just be like, "Oh, I fell asleep," and wake up with the meditation still going on. That happened to me during the retreat multiple times. So, and they call this clicking out. And I thought to myself, okay, falling asleep, whatever. I don't know why they call it clicking out. It's just falling asleep. But then further into the retreat, I started having this feeling almost like, you know what? I kind of have a faint memory of I think I was just doing something else while I was asleep. That's kind of interesting. Like there was still like a little bit of information from something else I was experiencing, but it like slips away like a dream kind of. So I, unbeknownst to me, suddenly just click out. And then when I wake up, I am in a room I do not recognize. And it's like just like this, dude. It's 100% real. It's like there's nothing mystical or magical. I was just standing in a room looking out a window.
So, as in, when you say it's just like this, you mean you felt as like awake, everything felt like as
Yep.
real as this
Yeah.
does. You're not
Nothing
hazy.
nothing nothing in me was questioning if it was real, if it was a dream, whatever. But then it occurred to me like, wait, where am I though? Like where am I right now? And then I
Mm.
start trying to retrace my steps. And then I have the revelation, I'm fucking meditating right now. I'm not in this room. And then as soon as I had that feeling, I was back in the check unit in the bed, and those sensations that you train yourself to feel are just going insane, like like vibrating super hard through my whole body. And it was like remarkably powerful compared to anything I had experienced up to that point. And I tried to move, and then when I tried to move, the full peel away, like the full non-physical peel away occurred. And I like legitimately cartoonishly started floating. Like I could feel my body floating, um, or my non-physical body floating, and it's like immediate terror takes over because it feels off. Like it feels like it to me, it felt like a bag of wet electricity or something. Just like shimmering, just energy form basically that still felt like it had the shape of a body. But when I would try to control it, it was just like very, very difficult to control. So your body is paralyzed in sleep paralysis. Like you still are weirdly dimly aware of your physical body, but you're mainly like your mind and everything is oriented from this other point of view. Like you're in this other thing, this other form. And I was fighting between the terror and the turn over and look at yourself, man. You got to turn over and look at yourself. Like that's the whole thing. And I could not do it, man. Like I just couldn't get control of that. And then I like first non-physically started like being like, someone help me, something just please help me get back in my body. And then I tried to start screaming it. Tried to start screaming, help me, help me. And then once that happened, I just like sunk back in and was back in my body. And I started like, okay, like feeling my hands, feeling my feet, and my heart's just racing. And my first thought is, I'm going to try to go back in the meditation. And then I was like, "No, fuck that. I can't stay here." And I just got out of the bed, went downstairs and started pacing around. So I did have the full-blown OB experience and it was insane, man. And to this day, like that it is hyper real. It's not like a dream. It's not like a well, maybe I did. It's like did you get punched or did you not get punched? It's like it's that viscerally real when it happens to you. So
Damn,
yeah,
bro.
man. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
real.
that is wild. So that floating out of your body happened after this experience of like waking up in a room that you didn't recognize.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
So I don't
And
know if that was an OBE or if that was like just a super lucid dream. And there's people that debate about this because like Bob Monroe seems to think like, yeah, you're going out of your body every night. Like everybody's probably going out of their body and they don't realize it. It's just a natural part of, sleeping and whatever. Um, but I don't know. I don't know what that was.
when you were realized you were in this room, got two questions. First of all, like were you you? Like was there a
Yeah.
sense of you being you? Okay.
I felt
And
like I was, yeah.
and like, how would you describe the room? Did it look like anywhere you have been before, or what did it look like?
Yeah, I try to remember the details of it. It felt like it could have been a room at Monroe Institute, but it was not a room I had been in. So the way that, it's laid out, it's kinda like a dorm, you know, like, you have this main
Mhm.
building where there's, like, a living room, there's a kitchenette area where you can get coffee and snacks all the time, then there's, like, an actual dining area where you have all your meals and stuff, and then there's all the, like, shared dormitories where there's, between 2 and a few beds in each room. Um, so I know there are rooms in that place I had not been in. So it is possible that I was in a room, but it didn't feel like I was in one of the dorm type sleeping areas. But it did feel like I was somewhere that could have been there because there's a lot of wooded areas when you look out the window, and I felt like I was looking out the window at a wooded area, sort of. I have, like, sort of a sense of, like, maybe the room was beige, and weirdly, I feel like there may have been, like, a Japanese style piece of art on the wall, like a crane or something. Um, but yeah, I don't remember a lot of the details, and it's kinda one of those things where if you're just in a place and you're doing whatever you're doing, you're not taking a deep note of like, okay, there's this over here, there's that, because you're
Yeah.
just hanging out, right?
Yeah.
And it felt like until I started questioning things, I didn't have the presence of mind to do that. I was just like, okay, here I am looking out the window.
Yeah.
It's normal,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so yeah, I wish I had more details, and I still wonder about that all the time. Like, was I physically in another room that was there?
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. And with the out of body thing that followed that, I actually had a really similar experience, but spontaneously about just over 10 years ago. Oh, yeah, around 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. This is like when I'd first gotten interested in meditating. I remember like just scrolling on Reddit, reading about like astral projection,
Yeah.
and I had no idea about the Monroe Institute back then. And remember reading things about like you got to feel your body vibrate and like all this kind of stuff. And I didn't know what I was doing. It was very just kind of like I would just meditate basically before I went to sleep, and that's literally all I was doing with like no expectation of like what would happen or anything like that. And I just remember like I don't think this happened during my meditation. It felt like it happened in my dreams or something like that. But I just remember, like, the way you described it was like it's almost like you were describing the same experience as what I had was the floating up out of the body and like feeling like you still have the form of your body, but it's like you can
Wow.
almost feel that it's like made out of like a bubble now. It's like you're a bubble in like body shape or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And because I wasn't intending to do this or really knew what was happening, I did turn around and I wasn't worried about it. I was just kind of like, because it was almost more out of like a wait, like this is weird. Like, wait a second, what is going on here?
wow.
And I remember turning, seeing myself, and
Holy
then like
shit.
the split second I did that, it was like whoosh, just like because I was like, what the fuck? And then it was like just like a vacuum straight back into the
Yeah,
body. And I remember waking up the next morning, like brushing my teeth, telling my girlfriend, like, I think I had like an out of body experience last night, and I was kind of like, hair frazzled, eyes kind of like, what the fuck just happened to me?
yeah,
And she was kind of like, oh, I don't even know what that is. But that
yeah,
stuck with me, man. And it's never happened again. And the more that I've learned, I've, never seriously dedicated myself to like trying to replicate it, but I've always been fascinated by it. And I think I've had one of those clicking out experiences on the Monroe tapes as well. I've never gone super deep on them, but probably in like somewhere within doing the first wave, like that
mhm,
first
mhm.
set that you
Yeah,
get.
yeah,
I remember going to sleep with it on, and then it's like when you're in that focused state, it's like you do kind of feel like you're asleep, but you're super just like zen and just mellowed out. And it was almost like then it was the morning, and I was kind of like, wait a second, I haven't been to sleep yet, but I'd feel recharged. Like I feel like I've slept all night,
yeah,
but I don't actually. I don't remember going to sleep. I feel like I've just kind of been meditating, and now it's the morning. Like there was almost like this time lossy,
Mm,
weird feeling where I definitely felt like I was out of it in some way, but not in the traditional sense of like what going to sleep and waking up
yeah.
feels like. It was almost like I'd been doing something all night. Like you said, like when you said that, it really kind of clicked that memory for me. It's crazy.
Well, I think so. I suspect that there is a sort of second self that we're not aware of. And I think maybe a lot of, hermeticists, people, esotericists, let's just say, there's this idea of the second birth, right? Like we think about this as like, like a born again Christian or something. But I think there's a esoteric version of this that people have been experiencing throughout the ages. And there's a part of the Hermetic text, I believe it's the Asclepius. Hermes is telling it's either his son or one of his students. I'm forgetting now. But he basically tries to explain to them what it's like to be reborn into the nous, the nous, which is this Greek word that means like mind. Um, or maybe he says logos, but I think it's nous. But anyway, there's literally this idea, I think, of having this like spiritual self that you become aware of. And I think part of this esoteric path is sort of like shrinking the boundary between those two selves. Like if you could become aware of both of those forms, and be aware even more of the time, like even if forget all the time, because I think that's probably not possible unless you're like some super dedicated yogi or something. But man, that would be very interesting because even though I've never gone out of body again, I've had other really interesting experiences doing Monroe. Like, I was doing it, I got very close to going out of body a second time, and again, the terror took over, and I was like, "No." I'm like, "No, I'm good." Um, but I did have an experience where I clicked out and I came back and I was just like having because you're wearing an eye mask, everything is or I was wearing an eye mask at least, everything was blacked out. And I was having this like vivid, beautiful, like sacred geometry, like luminous geometry, like coming toward me in my mind's eye. And I remember like again feeling like I woke up in the middle of that. Like I was there before I was aware of it. And then suddenly I became aware and I was like, don't move. Do not let this go away because this is like amazing. And I want to like be here for a little bit before it goes away. And I don't know like what that was, but it was dope and it was beautiful and insane. And I've never experienced anything like that again or before, like even, in other altered state sort of experiences. So I don't know what's going on, man. And I don't know how to even get in. Like, I'm telling the greatest hits. 90+% of this is like just you being calm and like comfortable and dealing with your thoughts. And then sometimes you just get profoundly calm and you're just like, and you just stay in that for like 20, 30 minutes. And that's great in and of itself. But every now and then you get this weird stuff, like stuff that may be nothing. Like you get weird flashes of imagery. That you wonder,
Yeah.
like, is this a psychic thing? Could I have been but you never get the feedback to know if you were seeing something?
Yeah, for
So yeah,
sure.
there's
I've
yeah,
had those experiences too, man, where it's and I kind of like when it happens, I feel like, I say things to myself like, oh, like the show is beginning because it's like randomly when you're at these like points of like deep meditation, yeah, suddenly it's like everything that you can kind of like vaguely see beyond like in that sort of darkness of your closed eyes suddenly sort of like takes shape and form and begins, yeah, like almost like putting on a performance. And that's why I kind of say
yeah,
like it's like the show begins. And often I've had, yeah, like you explained, it's almost like it's all rushing past your face constantly, or like you're moving through something that's creating
yeah,
like these crazy patterns. And
yes,
I ask myself the same questions like, am I creating this in my mind for myself? Like, is my mind putting on this show and I'm also like somehow split apart from that part of my brain in this meditation and I'm also enjoying that at the same time?
yeah,
Or am I actually sort of like, yeah, peering into something through my mind's eye?
yeah, dude.
And yeah, there's no answer to that. But I genuinely do feel that when I'm experiencing that, like, I'm being, like, hyper conscious of the fact, like, "Am I creating this? Am I doing this?" But overwhelmingly, I feel like, no, I feel like I'm actually experiencing this. It feels like I'm just sitting here as a spectator. Like, there's no part of my mind that feels like there's nothing I feel like is being active or performative or creative is probably the best
Yeah,
word, because I feel so still and calm that, like, the only thing going through my mind is just, like, that sort of single thought stream of just, like, observing.
right,
There's not enough, like, brain power happening to, like, be performing at the same time.
right.
That's the best way I can explain it, from my experience anyway.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I do think you get, of course, you can get into this crazy theater of the mind place and imagine things and go on these like, and some people were having these crazy dreamlike odysseys there, man. Like cloaked figures were coming to them and like giving them a
Mm,
ring and being like, you need to follow me on this path. And they would go down this path and then they would like heal some trauma from like their relationship with their mother or something. And like they're crying. And I'm
damn.
like, whoa, this is amazing. I'm not having anything like this though. Like to me, I'm just like, I did have some really profound things that I glazed over, but I didn't have any kind of like really visionary stuff like that, which is why I said I did not think I was going to go out of body. I thought if anybody was going to go out of body, it would be some of these people who are having these crazy visionary type experiences. But yeah, man, the mind is just crazy, and I have no idea how it works. But I know every time I spend more time in spaces like that, I'm always like, why don't I do this more? I really
Yeah,
that was one of my most profound takeaways is how much we run away from the darkness and the quiet and the most basic state that human beings have been in since time immemorial, and maybe even before consciousness took a body. It probably was in this state of disembodied dark thinking with occasional flourishes or something, and we
yeah,
run away from that like, just like it's the most terrible, horrifying thing, and then you spend even a week, like, at Monroe Institute, you just spend, like, a week going into that space more than you normally would, like, 4 or 5, 6 hours a day, and it's you get so comfortable there, man, like, it just feels so natural and comfortable to be in that state, and I've totally ruined my meditation habit. I'm not good with it anymore, but, um,
yeah. I think
anyway.
it's something that, again, unless you're some super serious yogi, up in the Himalayas or something, and not like attached to, having to go to work and maintain relationships and all the stresses that we're sort of like subjected to. I guess it's just one of those things that kind of ebbs and flows. Some people are really strict with it, some people aren't. It's hard, man. It's definitely hard. I'm the same. I've definitely dropped the ball, but even just having this conversation with you is like a nice little reminder of the benefits of doing that. 100%, man.
Likewise. Yeah, I wanna get back
Yeah.
into it too.
Yeah, me too. Let's go back to Paul Hynek and the DMT
Yeah,
pen.
sure. Yeah.
So, okay, because yeah, obviously, I feel like psychedelics have sort of played a prominent role in like inspiring you in your sort of pursuits on this
Mhm.
channel. So tell me, I guess, what sort of lit that match for you? Like, where did that start?
For me, it was definitely, there's one mushroom experience in particular, but it's really sort of a collection of them over many years. Um, but there's one I actually tell the story about on another one of the early videos that did well on the channel, which was, like, my first heroic dose, my, like, first McKenna style heroic dose experience, and it was one of the most powerful, overwhelming visionary experiences I've ever had. And inevitably, like, there's gonna be the dose bros who are gonna be like, 5 grams isn't a lot. To me, 5 grams is a shit ton. It was an incredibly profound brain melting experience. So anyway, I'll try to tell the story. This was quite a while ago, but this particular time, one of the most difficult parts about it was early on, once it like really started coming on. I could no longer filter between my thoughts and my speaking. Like, I couldn't tell if I was thinking it or speaking it, and I just started blabbering. I got, like, what, uh, is called glossolalia, and, Terence McKenna would talk about glossolalia, sometimes, which is just like, y you just start babbling, blabba-goo ba dibba, like, sort of like that kinda thing.
That's a good
Um,
McKenna. That's a good McKenna. I
um
like it.
Thank you, thank you. It's fun to do. Um, but yeah, so I had never experienced that until this trip, and I was just I must have been awful to be around. Like, I was, like, next to my girlfriend and one of my best friends, and I just couldn't the filter was off, basically. It was just like a faucet
So
of mouth noises.
were you just literally thinking out loud, or was like anything thought, like, was any private thought you had just being vocalized? So you were almost like having a conversation with yourself, and people were just like, is he good?
I would have seemed like hyper autistic, basically, like laughing at myself, crying, just like getting overwhelmed basically by the chatter in or coming through my own mind. And so that was that part. But then as that experience continued going, you just keep dilating more and more and more and more until your psyche is just this one unified like blown open sensation where everything is hilarious and tragic and overwhelming. And I remember just like hyperventilating and just being like for like a long period of time where you're crying at just like the tragedy of being alive and all of the horrors in the world, but then you're like laughing harder than you've ever laughed. You're feeling like I am legitimately plugged into source. I am enlightened right now. Like I get it. I get everything. Um, not just in this trip, but in many uh mushroom chips in particular. I always get synesthesia, which is really interesting. So like, usually I have some kind of like playlist, like ambient playlist on or whatever. I will literally start seeing like color sweeps when there's like chord changes and stuff. Like I'll see like a big like sweep of color
Dude, that's so
depending.
cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I don't have that at all. Some people I guess do have it just like all the time, which is I'm very jealous. Um
Wait, so you don't get this, or you do?
Only on mushrooms I do. On mushrooms I
Yes,
do,
yeah,
but
yeah,
some
yeah.
people just naturally are synesthetes, and
Oh,
what's
really?
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and
I
there's
had no
different
idea.
versions of it too, like, people think, like, letters and sounds are like, okay, an A is always yellow or whatever, I'm just making that up,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but and there is it's interesting, they've done studies on it to see how much comparison there is between what synesthetes say, like, is an A note or a C note, is it always and it's interesting. Some of them have a surprising amount of overlap, and there's more wiggliness in other things, but it seems like there's enough there for there to be an actual correlation. But yeah, that gets down a whole different rabbit hole. But I'm trying to remember, man, like what some of the most profound bits from this experience were. One of the things that's coming to mind right now is there was this like legitimate tree of life kind of experience where I was experiencing my connection to my family and also humanity and the world at large, like the planet at large, where you truly feel like, oh, we're basically plants that got the ability to move around. Like the earth like granted us this ability to evolve to this point for a very specific purpose. And I always get I don't know about you or if you've had similar psychedelic experiences, but I often get that like cliche sort of planetary, like, you guys are fucking this up kind of message. Like I get that message anytime I have a profound or even like moderate dose. I get that a lot. Um, but that
Like, as in, like just some kind of thought stream channeling into your mind, like a message that's just downloading essentially.
Yeah. Like it feels like the spirit of the planet is basically like, okay, you're opened up now, so I can tell you this. Like you guys are not doing this right. Like you're supposed to be I get honestly this sort of like astro theological, almost kind of like hero's journey message. Like you're supposed to like first work on this planet, and then you're supposed to go work on the next one. Like you're all
Mm,
supposed to unify together and bring light and consciousness and beauty to the cosmos. That's the whole point for you guys, and you're not doing that. Like you can't even get along with each other. You're not even close. And then there's almost a little bit of a like foreboding warning, like I could probably wipe you out if I needed to. So stop it. Um, Something along those lines. But anyway, this tree of life experience was very, very profound, and it really made me feel connected to my family. It really made me feel connected to the planet at large. And it was not like a metaphorical, like, oh, I feel connected. It literally felt like a world tree kind of vision. Like I was almost like I haven't seen that Norseman movie, but I know there's that there's that world tree scene in the Norseman, and,
I haven't seen
I've
it.
it's a cool scene. It's way darker than what I experienced because that's like this it feels like the realm of the dead sort of, vision in that movie, but that's not what it was like for me. Um, so yeah, that was one, and in those spaces, man, when you just feel like you are I always go through the profound "you are going to die" kind of experience as well. Usually early on in the trip, it's like, "Oh, here we go again." It's like just knowledge of my, finite nature. I'm gonna die. Everything I love is gonna die, and then I have like the super breakdown moment, and then it's like okay, so what are you gonna do with the time that you have? Sort of reawakening or resurrection moment. So that truly is as ridiculous as it sounds, going through experiences like that did really help me orient to taking the plunge into doing something creative. Because for most people, or myself at least, I needed some kind of push to get off of the well-worn path. Like I always wanted to. I've always been, you know, somebody who wanted to be creative. I like grew up playing in bands and like, stuff like that. But I'd never really believed in myself enough, I don't think, to think that it was possible. And experiences like that, in a weird way, just make you so deeply aware of the limited time that you have and the reality of like, "Hey, this is it, man." Like, do you wanna wake up when you're 50 or 60 and, like, being in a cubicle? Because if you don't, you better start making moves. Like, you better start, like, doing something that you think actually leads to the acorn becoming the oak tree now, like not in a while. So I actually think I think the name Third Eye Drops may have come out of one of those experiences, if I remember correctly. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm forgetting a lot of details of the story because it's been a long time, but there's a video out there. There's a video out there.
And is the name Third Eye Drops kind of like you're applying almost sort of like a medicine to help people sort of open up to a new way of looking at things with an eye drop for their third
Yes,
eye?
that is definitely one layer of it. Another layer of it is it's just like supposed to be kind of like a cheeky, you know, metaphorical thing, and part of
Yeah.
it too is, like, I know that it's kind of cheesy, but I was like, "Whatever, I think I like it." So I just stayed with it, and
Yeah.
it is
No, it's
what it
cool,
is at this
man.
point.
It's cool. I think it's a great name. It works well. And with the vibe, like you've got the studio set up there with the lights and stuff. Like it's got a whole kind of it's got a whole feel to it, and that's something that I personally really appreciate as well.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
just going back to like what you were saying about how you get these sort of messages about how like we're doing it wrong, and like if we weren't meant to be this way. The thing is, like, I mean, I agree with that. First of all, I obviously agree with that. But like the problem or the question that I get when I hear that, because obviously we hear that a lot, right? You hear it with people who have encounters with greys or
Yeah.
whatever. Like these encounters or experiences, they tell the same message that we're not treating the earth correctly. But I think that like they're and I don't know. Correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but like I feel like there is something that has potentially been here for a long time, like a structure that is forcing humanity to kind of be the way that we are. Like, I don't think humanity got off track, let's say, just by chance, and we have just sort of
Mhm.
continued down this road of like materialism, and people just kind of like getting into a job, like you said, working to your 50, realizing that they never really did anything meaningful, and now it's too late. Like, it feels like there are so many things, let's call them like traps in society that are there for people to just kind of fall into, live a kind of meaningless life, paying their taxes to the system, and then that's it. Like, feels like something has a like a stranglehold on this civilization. So when I hear those stories, I think like, why why are we getting that message when it feels like we are sort of like trapped, or hostage, for
Mhm.
maybe like lack of a better term. Like, if there is something higher than us that wants better for us and the world, why is there no sort of, and I don't expect you to have an answer for this, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking out loud, like, why is there no kind of intervention in the forces that are making things the way that they are? Like, these are the kind of things that I think about. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways to look at that. I mean, I think the first one is, and this makes me think of, it's funny because McKenna is also one of these people who would entertain a lot of things, but I can also hear his voice being like, there is no vast conspiracy. We're all perfectly capable of anesthetizing ourselves into complacency.
Mm,
I,
mm,
I do think that that is true to a degree. I think if we all search our own souls, a lot of us will see that that is true, that
mm,
we do have agency, but it's just hard. It's hard to exert. It feels scary to risk. It feels scary to put yourself out there to do something different than what you've been doing. Um, you and I deal with that all the time, right? Like even like audience capture, like, well, that video on that topic did well, so now should I just do that again? It's like a micro version of that until suddenly you find yourself on this hamster wheel you don't want to be on, regardless of what we're talking about. If it's a day job, if it's a relationship, whatever. But that said, I do think it's totally possible that there are unseen forces manipulating things or conspiring to keep us ignorant of certain truths. I totally think that's possible. And there's so many different versions of it, man, because like you could go with some kind of like Gnostic angle where, you know, you could conceive of that message I got as like a message from Sophia, but the
mm.
demiurge is there, like holding us down or whatever, or like preventing us from awakening. Um, I don't really subscribe to that, but I think if there are forces like that, I think they're probably human forces. Like I think humanity is probably implicated in fucking itself for the most part. And whether that's a group of elites, whether that's our own collective complacency and laziness and like Epicurean desires, just trying to seek comfort, and destroying things along the way, and requiring African children to mine, you know, conflict minerals so that we can have iPhones or whatever. Like, I don't know, man. It's so complicated and there's so much going on, but I always leave room for nefarious top-down actors as well. I totally think that's possible. And yeah.
Yeah. What about the it's like, how would you recommend like mushrooms? Like, do you believe in like the stoned ape theory that they are like sort of integral to the development and evolution of our mind?
Well, I mean, the stoned ape hypothesis is always fun. Um, and I think that there could be truth to it. But I do think there's for sure truth, and I think that there's like scientific evidence to back this up, that psilocybin does upregulate BDNF, which is like brain derived nootropic factor, which is like what helps you literally grow um, new brain matter, or like thicken brain matter, or create
Mm,
new synaptic connections or whatever. Um, so that I appears to be a thing, and I do think that it helps me think more creatively. I think it puts me in a better mood. I think it gives me um, a different kind of energy when I do it, that is like not available in many other sources. Would I broadly recommend it? It's like, yeah, kind of, but I mean, there's many, many reasons to be cautious, particularly with, like, dosing,
Yeah.
like, dip a toe first, don't be irresponsible. If you're on an SSRI, you shouldn't do it. If you're not otherwise stable, if you're going through something that's like a really hard
Yeah.
time, wait until you're
Yeah.
stable. Like there's a lot of considerations and you got to do your own research and figure out what's right for you. But for me, all I can say is that for me it's been a powerful like catalyst and something that I'll continue to go back to the well on every now and then.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, it's very easy to like, look at like all the world leaders and like warmongers and just be like, God damn it,
Yeah.
you all need a 5 gram heroic dose. But yeah, to blanket statement that across everyone definitely probably needs a little bit more
Hopefully
consideration.
hopefully with them in the same room too. That'd be crazy. Like
Yes. Yeah,
yeah. What
let's
if
get Trump in a room with like with Putin and like split 10 grams of mushrooms and just see what
yeah.
happens.
And Xi Jinping, and then they also have to have, like, the counter like, whoever they consider to be, like, I don't know, like, Nancy Pelosi or something needs to also be there. Like, or, like, whoever Trump hates the most, like, also
Yeah,
needs to
yeah.
be there, and it needs to be televised too. That should be
Yes,
that should
yeah.
be part of the part of the office. You gotta go through that initiation of the public, um,
Yes. Should be
defrocking of your psyche.
the inauguration, and yeah, we all get to be a fly on the wall. I like that. Let's let's step it up a level because, like I said earlier, got me very curious when you said Paul Hynek whips out a DMT pen. I've never done DMT, so my perception of how it works is probably wrong. But when you said that he'll just whip out a DMT cartridge and hit it in the middle of contact in the desert, when I think of people doing DMT, like I'm usually thinking that they're like that they need to be like sitting down. They kind of
Mhm.
go to another dimension. So like, how does that work for him?
It's not exactly like that. I mean, you have to take a lot of very deep you have to take at least several 3 plus deep inhales, that you're, like, holding for a long period of time to get there. Um,
So that's like
so
breaking through what I'm
yes.
talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so you can
Yeah,
hit it in
and
like a casual social
totally.
sense,
Yes, you
right?
can.
And what
Yes,
does
you
that
can.
do?
I would say it imbues you with, like, an energy and, like, a charge, like, kind of like a little bit of, like, a vibratory, like, dose of energy, and I've actually failed to break through. Like, I've never gotten the full blown, like, hyper slap, like, I'm in, like, the alien realm
With the
full
machine
blown
elves?
experience. No, I haven't had it.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, it's weird, man, because it's like a totally different like when you're eating something or you're drinking ayahuasca, it's like you're there. Like you did the thing and now you just have to wait and it's going to happen. As long as you took the requisite dose. But with that it's total like the delivery mechanism is totally different. You got to do the like huge exhales and like yeah, it's just a different and the potency of each pen is different. So it's yeah.
But what,
Yeah.
you've drank ayahuasca?
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's definitely
Did you
the
do like a
other
retreat?
yes. Yeah, so, I went to Peru about 5 years ago, and that was by far the most powerful and challenging experience I've had. It was 5 sessions, and every session like, that was the most I mean, as someone who does not come from this, you know, I've already said, like, I don't skew toward this, like, talk of demons and demonic shit. Every trip for me started in like I have offered myself up to demons. Like the demons are like devouring me or something. It was super dark and super challenging. You're oftentimes very nauseous because the ayahuasca vine itself is like a purgative thing. Like it makes you feel sick. So you're feeling ill and nauseous plus you're having like this mental, visionary kind of just darkness is how it was for me for a lot of the experience. It took the whole first night was just super challenging, difficult, dark the whole way through. One of the most like embarrassing, you know, moments of my life in some ways because I just I could not control myself, man. Like I was just like pacing and I couldn't stay where they wanted me to stay. And like I had to like get they had showers basically for people who were freaking out. And like I had to get in the shower at one point, and it was terrible, man. It was a terrible experience. Um, and that the room was chaos, man. So they call it a
Yeah,
maloka.
how many people is it? Are they like those sort of circular rooms where everyone's just kind of got their own
Yeah,
little bed and you're all just basically battling demons?
yeah. So it's so where I flew in was Iquitos. Iquitos is like known for this. Like there are hundreds of places you can go drink ayahuasca around Iquitos. I went to this retreat center like maybe an hour bus ride outside of the city into the rainforest, and it's like it was a beautiful place. I don't think it's there anymore, but yeah, so their Maloka is like a big, it's like a wooden structure and it's like open to the air, but there's like, there's like mosquito net around, so there's not like just bugs flying in and
Mhm.
everything. Um, but yeah, there's like 25, 30 people in that room, and there was like not a lot of room to like spread out. So it was like that first night was chaos, dude. It was like a hand grenade of chaos, like slowly exploded psychically in that room. Like one girl was, like, screaming and, like, cussing out the shamans and had to be taken out. There's people, like, moaning and like, just crying, like, "Ah," just and then
Damn.
they're playing the music, like, hitting the drums, singing. So it's just, like, a crazy
Yeah,
the whole
dude.
room had a crazy explosive aura.
And,
Um,
and I feel like that and like those sounds and that energy of people screaming and
yeah,
vomiting and moaning is
yeah,
only going to compound whatever mental experience you're
totally.
having before the exterior world comes in. Like you're just
Yeah.
going to be like, holy shit.
And it's funny, man, because like, I'd had a other experience by that point, and I was toward the end. So everybody's in a line basically to drink, and I was near the end of the line. So I was like 20 minutes, 30 minutes behind the first people, and I'm feeling it start to come on pretty strong. And I'm just sitting there meditating, my eyes closed, and just like, and I'm like, my mental chatter is, I got this, I got this, I got this. And then it's like coming on, and I remember telling myself, "Okay, I'm good with this. Right here, I'm good." And that was at like a 2 out of what eventually became a 10. And, around then is when people started freaking out. So I reminded myself like, "Oh shit, I'm like 20, 30 minutes behind them. So I'm going to be coming up for another 20, 30 minutes." And yeah, man, it was crazy. The that mushroom experience I was talking about before was very overwhelming, but this was a
Mm,
different kind of overwhelming that felt like being in a like fractal psychic shipwreck. It was just like chaotic mind's
mm.
eye visuals, just disorder, just you could not calm down. Just like I said, a very dark general presence. But it eventually go ahead.
I was just going to say, is this generally like the expected outcome? Because like the idea of these ceremonies, from my understanding, is like you said, it's like to purge,
Yeah.
I guess, some form of like negativity or things that you're maybe like holding on to deep in your psyche that you're maybe even unaware of. So like, are the people running these things kind of aware and prepared for it to become very chaotic? And is this sort of normal?
I can't really speak to what's normal because this is the only one I've done, but I have number of friends who've done many, many more. And it seems like it does really run the gamut between places and the kind of brews people use because although ayahuasca itself, it's only two components. It's usually a chacruna leaf that has DMT in it, and it's the vine that has the MAOI in it, which is make allows you to have orally active DMT. Because normally, if you make a tea out of the leaf or whatever, you have a enzyme in your stomach that will block the DMT from being absorbed. But the
Hmm.
vine is what it's an MAOI. It's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So those are the only 2 ingredients you need, but a lot of shamans are like, "I also work with this plant and this tree and this other thing," and I know for a fact the shamans at this place had, like, 12 or 13 different ingredients in this brew, so that's all I know.
Yeah.
What that actually did, I'm not sure, but all I can say is it was very powerful and very difficult, but it was not all dark. By the end of night 2, I did start getting into some, like, really beautiful, like, glorious spaces and, very, like, euphoric, but it was still, like, 2/3 of that night was very hellish. Night 3 started very hellish again, but I had, like, the most profound, what I honestly would consider to be, like, an entity encounter that I've ever had in my life on the 3rd night.
Okay, all right. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that. But I just want to
Yes.
ask quickly. So, after the first night, you have this kind of hellish nightmare night where people are screaming, moaning, all this kind of stuff, and then what it sort of wears off after 6 to 8 hours. You go to sleep.
Yeah.
You wake up the next day probably feeling a little bit sort of frazzled as you do after that kind of experience, and then you basically are like, okay, back in for another night, and also the next
Yep.
4 nights. That's got to take a bit of
Yeah.
like mental
Yeah,
fortitude.
dude. Well, full transparency, while it's going on, I'm fully like, I will never, never do this again. Like this is so stupid. Like, what am I doing? This is fucking ridiculous. And then you get through it, and then you start, and for me, I came out of it pretty cleanly every night. Like they would light a lantern when it was done, and people could stay as long as they felt like they needed to stay. But they were saying, like, okay, the ceremony's over. If you're feeling ready to leave, you can leave. And every night by the time that thing came on, I was like, okay, back to consensus reality. And then as soon as you're back, you're sort of like, maybe it wasn't that bad. I
Yeah,
could probably
yeah,
do that
yeah,
again. And
yeah,
then especially when you start talking to people and you're all kind of sharing experiences. And then by the time it's the next night, you're like, I can't sit out. This is, come on, I have to do this. So that's kind of the mental loop, every day. Um, but yeah, weirdly, I think I slept pretty decent. It's hard to remember because it was, like I said, it was about 5 years ago. Um, but yeah, man, so night 3 was insanely profound, and I've never had an experience like this before or since then. Um, I did have an encounter with something that felt exactly like Jung's Philemon, like a wise old man, very advanced, very wizardly kind of thing. It felt like we were in this astral lagoon or something. Um, and it was a very loving kind of, you're really going through a lot. I think you want to talk to me. Like, what can I do for you? Kind of vibe. And it felt very much like pat on the head. It's okay, buddy. Like, you're safe here. I got you. Um, and I felt dumb when he asked me that. I was like, I'm here to seek. I'm here to understand. Like, I want to know what's going on. And he's like, what I'm about to say is just sounds so obvious, but it was very profound in the moment. He basically was like, you're playing this Michael game right now. You're doing fine. Just keep playing it the best you can play it. And then it felt like we were underneath, like, the night sky, Milky Way vibes. And then he goes, and you see that? After you're done playing the Michael game, you're going to play the infinity game. And that was pretty much it. And it was just like, holy, okay. And it just was in that moment, I knew that. I knew that what he
yeah.
was saying was right. And I had this, and it's the only time in my life where I told you, like, the name Third Eye Drops was like semi tongue in cheek, but I knew I was going to be talking about, like, uh, spiritual slop all the time on the show. So, like, it's going to work. This is, like, going to be appropriate. But that was the one time in my life where I remember leading up to this experience, I kept doing this because I felt like there was something on my head. Like, I was having a physical sensation in the center of my head. And I kept being like, what is on my head? And then I started having, like, like, the insanely beautiful, profound visions that led to that. And then I just started laughing to myself, like, I'm having a third eye experience right now. I'm like, this is what this is. It has to be.
Yeah.
Um, and then post that encounter with that being, or whatever you want to call it, I had the most razor sharp mind's eye, where I don't typically have a great imagination. Like, I don't have a great ability to, if you're like, imagine a cube and then imagine inside the cube there's an eye, and then the eye is like, I couldn't visualize that very well if you told me to, but in that moment, it felt like my creativity was just dialed up to 10. My mind visionary experiences were just maxed out, and for the rest of that trip, I was just like, "I can make anything, I can do anything," and then as soon as I, left the Maloka that night, I ran to my journal and I wrote, like, in all caps, like, "Never doubt this happened. This is real you're going to doubt it. You're gonna start telling yourself, "Ah, I was on ayahuasca. What don't do that. Like, this is the most profound," you know? Um, so yeah. And then the following 2 nights, I did very small amounts because I had the very strong sense, like, that's what I came here for.
Yeah.
I don't, like, need to go deep anymore. Like, I've gotten more than what I ever thought I could get out of this experience, so I'm gonna chill the last 2 nights and, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool, and that makes a lot of sense. When you got told that, was it almost like, rather than being told, what you even said yourself seemed kind of obvious and straightforward or whatever, did it feel more like you remembered something you always kind
Yes.
of knew anyway? Yeah.
Yes, I was just so there's that word in, Platonism, anamnesis, and it's essentially the idea that knowledge isn't this empirical thing where you go out and you acquire the knowledge, it's a remembering. At least true knowledge is like a remembering. This is something that Socrates talks about in a couple different dialogues. The Meno is one, but I think there's another one too, at least. But yeah, it's the idea that like your soul on some level already knows. Like it already
Mm,
knows. Um, and when we say like soul means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but in the esoteric, Western esoteric, Greek, Platonic, Hermetic sense, your soul is literally a minor god. It's made of the same substance that, you know, the gods are made out of essentially. And the demiurge, so another important distinction, most people think the demiurge is evil. Originally, the demiurge was not evil. It's just a Greek word that means craftsman. So if you read Plato's Timaeus, which is like this dialogue given by this Pythagorean sage, who he's giving this big lecture essentially on how how the cosmos was constructed by the divine mind, and the divine mind is this actually benevolent mind who's trying to build the best work, like artistry that it can build. But by virtue of the fact that it's making things physical, it has all these problems because it's trying to take these eternal forms and make them physical. And then as soon as you take these eternal things and make them physical, it's like there's going to be some problems. But while he's making things and he's making all the different souls, they use like an analogy of like smithing. So it's like you have this pure material that you start with, and then they start with like these making like these cosmic and hyper cosmic gods with that material. And then eventually they get down to like human souls, and it's the same thing. It's just like lesser purity basically than those. So your soul on some level is the same thing as all of that stuff. So I think on some level there's some part of us, if that's true in any sense, which I think it is, um, there's some ancient, immortal, incorruptible part of us that already knows everything. But I think by getting into a body, we just get all twisted around and confused and we just forget everything. Um, so yeah, that did feel like one of those moments where I had like almost like a soul type memory or something like that.
yeah.
But
Yeah, no, that's interesting, man, and resonates with me strongly because I'm a big believer in just like it seems like sometimes with some things we just have like a sense of knowing and like I don't know what that actually is, but I definitely think that there's something to it. And like, yeah, lots of people have written about it in sort of different ways. Like you hear people talk about like, the Akashic records and, there is
yeah,
this sort of like non-physical library that is eternal of everything that's sort of ever been that we all again have access to. But yeah, man, that's super, super interesting. And going back to sort of what we are talking about before about like, why um why does the world seem to have these kind of problems that are, I guess, intrinsic and everlasting to to the world that we live in? What you're saying about like coming down into like a physical form reduces its purity and kind of comes along with these I guess, yeah, problems, I guess, it kind of makes sense. Like it kind of like what you just explained is potentially an explanation to sort of like why things are the way that they are. And it's almost like it's not actually a problem, but it's a mechanism for us to kind of like learn and experience and just kind of have a have an experience here on Earth.
I hope that's
Sounds a
what
lot
it
like what's
is.
in yeah, it sounds a lot like what's in the raw material as well, which
Mhm.
I've only just started reading through that, so I'm not well versed on it by any means. But yeah, the fact that there is this sort of like non-duality and that everything is just kind of one thing designed to experience itself. I find comfort in that, and that's why I'm kind of excited to read through it because, yeah, I mean, as you know, I do think it does seem like there is like a lot of darkness in the world, but your perspective on it, I think, can have a massive effect on like the experience that we have with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I go back and forth on this all the time in terms of like, what are we here to do? What is our agency versus our lot that we just can't change? Is it, completely futile to try to like swim upstream against all the terrible shit going on? And of course I don't know what the answer is, but I think that my true guess is that we have that there's like this clearly we don't have unbridled free will, but I'm not one of those people who thinks we have zero free will either. I think we have just the right amount of agency to do at least something specific of consequence, right? Like maybe what we can do, like maybe it's just the acorn becoming the oak tree. And even that's like kind of predetermined, but it's your job to play that RPG out. Like you get to fucking play the Red Dead Redemption, the Final Fantasy, the whatever of your own life, and you can get to the late stages of the game or not. You can just like stay in the first village, maybe figuratively or literally or both, um, and like stay at level 2, and I think it's something like that, man, and I think incidentally, that might be why we're so obsessed with storytelling, because we're not sure how to do that, so then we make a microcosm of that, and through doing that, we get some kind of, like, cathartic feeling of at least miming that we're doing that, you know?
Mm.
Um, and I
Or
yeah.
even like even like mapping out the potential. Like I'm a big believer in like, everything kind of it starts as a thought first. Like we think it, we then speak it, we kind of put the idea out and then it's sort of created into reality. And this idea of storytelling may even be like the potential mapping of someone's RPG that they're unaware of where it leads. And through these stories, it kind of gives suggestion or like direction on like where it could go for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been inspired so many times in like pods over the years, particularly early on, man. And that's what made me want to do it is hearing conversations when I was like in my probably like late 20s, during that like early era of long form podcasts and people having philosophical conversations and like Duncan Trussell talking about like spirituality and DMT with Joe Rogan with like way early on, like those kinds of conversations. And then being like, oh, these are the exact kind of like topics I want to dive into and like learn more about. And then you hear that other people are doing that and you're like, well, I could just do that too, even though no one gives a shit about me. But then you somehow work up the courage to do it. And, here we are years later trying to do the thing. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
I
yeah,
think I can't remember what the saying is. It's like a spiritual trope or whatever that once you sort of start like being like part of the future that you sort of vision yourself in, like you said, doing those podcasts, talking about those things. Like again, it sounds stupid and obvious, but like it's almost like we expect the world to kind of change before us and then we step into it. Where it's like, no, if you just start doing the thing first, generally the world will then begin to change in front of you and then you step into it. But it's like
yeah,
it's on you first. Like you make the change, the world will generally shift and then you step. It's not gonna change for you. You know what I mean?
right, right.
Yeah.
Probably not. Probably not.
No. I don't think so, man. Well, dude, I'm a massive fan of yours, and I'm looking forward to the stuff that you keep putting out this year. Keep administering those third eye drops to us. I'm
Thank
here.
you,
I'm
brother.
here.
I really appreciate it.
Um, Yeah, my pleasure, man. Is there anything you want to plug? Obviously, you got your YouTube channel, but plug that and anything else you got.
It's pretty much it, man. Like the channel and the transmissions are pretty much what I'm doing. I do have an
You're on
essay coming
Spotify as
out.
well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Spotify, YouTube, those are the 2 main outlets, but it's on Apple. It's probably, like, wherever in audio form. I do have an essay coming out on the OBE, out of body stuff, that's gonna be in this really dope graphic novel series called High Strangeness. The first, I think the first 3 volumes are out, and I believe mine is gonna be in the 4th. That just went I just got the proofs for it. It looks super cool. I'm very, very stoked to be a part of that. Um, yeah, I think that's about it. I think that's about it.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, it was a pleasure having you, and I'm looking forward to hopefully meeting you, bro, at Contact in the Desert
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah, it'll be fun, man. It'll be fun. Let's definitely do it.
Cool, man. All right,
And
take
thanks for
care. We'll
having me,
talk
and
soon.
congrats on what you have going on too, man, because, like, it is not easy. It is not easy to do what you're doing, and I know you're working hard, and yeah, just keep doing it.
Thanks, man. Means a lot coming from you. Appreciate that.